Hey, my friend. Tonight we're diving headfirst into a shadowy, suffocating world, a merciless realm where cunning assassins stalk the medieval gloom with no escape in sight. Picture a chilly October night in Philadelphia's Old Quarter. Narrow cobblestone alleys glow faintly under flickering oil lamps. The clatter of horse-drawn carriages echoes like the heartbeat of a city caught between waking and dreaming. In those whispering shadows, there are men who thrive on blood-soaked contracts. No, they don't swagger in billowing cloaks like Hollywood loves to pretend. They look more like grim blacksmiths, hauling rusted toolboxes and a promise to clean up a problem, quick and quiet. In post-revolutionary America, anyone with a fortune, a patch of land, or even just a decent horse didn't dirty their hands as a killer. They hired someone else to pull the trigger, as casually as hiring a man to dig a well. And the ones who took the job? Deserters, jobless sailors, escaped convicts, ghosts chewed down to bone by history, ready to cut down a greedy senator for a sack of cents, just enough to buy a night's sleep in a moldy attic. No kid in frontier Kentucky ever woke up in the morning chuckling, "When I grow up, I'll slit the mayor's throat for $8 and hide in a coal cellar for 3 days." Being an assassin was never a dream. It was the last stop on a derailed life. Richard Hayes, the man we'll follow in this tale, was once a gunner on the Chesapeake Fleet. A ship exploded, leaving him half-deaf and without a pension. He washed ashore, drifting through Baltimore's taverns, where cheap whiskey mingled with dark secrets. Every coin slid across a bar, every name whispered between strangers could spark a death warrant. The night Hayes took his first contract, half the travel fee paid up front, a cold drizzle fell. Gas lamps cast dim reflections on wet pavement, glinting like glass knives. He steeled himself. "Just one throat to cut, then I'll sail again." But the sea forgets its broken sailors. Only the city remembers, demanding they pay its debts in blood. Truth be told, Richard wasn't any slicker than a coal miner. He had 3 things: a short-bladed dagger scavenged from the Yorktown battlefield, footsteps light as a stray cat's, and eyes honed to the darkness of a ship's hold. Training? None. What he graduated from was a string of sleepless nights, each one shorter as imaginary knocks at the door grew louder. Assassins' manuals never sat on tavern counters. Fear was the textbook. Survive your first job, and you learn to wear water-soaked cloth gloves to grip the knife. You learn to splash vinegar on your coat to mask the blood stench. You learn to pry at wall crevices for hidden escape routes. The tuition? A broken blade tip, a scorched scrap of memory, and a curse to never sleep soundly again. The payout sounded tempting. $70 silver, the client promised, but it came with an invisible footnote: "If you're still breathing when it's done." In Boston, men stabbed each other over salt tax laws. In New York, fur traders preferred shotgun pellets to debates. So, time and again, Hayes stumbled back to Fiddler's Green Tavern, hands trembling from adrenaline, pockets often empty. The client had skipped town, or worse, sent another thug to lurk at a street corner, ready to silence the hero of the night before. Cities had little patience for lingering memories. A knife in the back was always cheaper than a debt unpaid. So why did some keep sliding down this slope? Because they had nothing left to shatter. No family. Hayes's parents lay buried somewhere in a Potomac graveyard. no future. The Navy had no use for a half-deaf veteran. And of course, no dental insurance. In Savannah, you could hire a man to chop wood, mine coal, or end a life. 3 services, same rotting wood smell. The only difference? The life taker didn't hang a sign. He left a note tucked under someone's coat flap. Hayes learned the rules. Keep your mouth shut, move fast, and never admit your trade when the whiskey's gone, especially not to a constable who bartered in secrets. If Richard ever thought killing was a shortcut to riches, life quickly set him straight. One night in Charleston, he crouched in a granary for 3 days, surrounded by rats, fleas, and the alien thud of his own heartbeat. The worst part wasn't the killing. It was the waiting. Blood pounding in his temples, imagining a guard just inches beyond a wooden wall. After that job, he got $6 and a curt nod. $6. Not enough for a week's rent. The ocean wind howled along the docks, reminding him, from the moment you draw blood, even the money reeks, as if every coin is etched with never existed. It's bitter, but an assassin's life has no other graduation. No medals, no parades, no tombstones for invisible men. Succeed 12 times, and one slipped knife lands your face on wanted posters from New Orleans to Albany. A nightmare printed on cheap paper. Then every alley turns into a gallows. Hayes knew the truth. This trade had no way out. It was a rope tied around your waist, tightening with every step forward. So, if tonight you dim the lights, crank the fan, and insist on hearing the romance of assassins, remember this. Beneath Hollywood's glossy black cloaks lies only the chill of a crumbling attic, the cling of gunpowder on a sleeve, and the scratch of rats devouring your last crumbs of bread. The real question isn't, why were they so cruel? It's, what choice did they have when the world had already shoved them under the overpass? A few weeks after that rain-soaked night in Charleston, Richard Hayes received a parcel bound with coarse twine, sealed with wax bearing a bee, the crest of a wealthy Richmond family. The courier said nothing, just dropped the package on the tavern counter and vanished before Hayes's beer could foam. Inside, 8 double-eagle coins, tarnished with the scent of copper. A hand-drawn map of a mansion along the James River, and a small note, its ink faded. Judge Luther W. Merrick. Deadline before dawn on the 12th. The man who rang the bell of justice by day, it turned out, borrowed humanity's sins by night. Rumor had it, Merrick kept 6 guards, a hunting dog, and a web of alarm bells tied to every window. But more terrifying was his reputation. A judge who'd hanged 4 highwaymen with a single hurried signature. Now someone wanted that iron heart ripped out and tossed into the icy James. Hayes didn't agonize. He'd slid too far down the slope, and 8 gold coins, their glint alone, could buy 3 months of warm beds, strong whiskey, and a ship to any port that didn't check papers. But to claim that gold, he'd have to breach the red brick mansion with its wrought iron railings, where the night was torn apart by the hoarse bark of an aging bloodhound. On the 11th night, a crescent moon hung over the river's south bank. Hayes slipped into the rear garden through a drainage culvert. The stench of angelica roots and damp earth mingled with withered magnolia, clogging his throat. He crawled low, heartbeat sinking with the chirp of night cicadas. His old dagger slept under his sleeve. One ear still buzzed with silence, but the other caught the steady tick of a pendulum clock in the ground floor study, the house as still as a cathedral before Mass. He nudged a stained glass window. Its dry hinge squeaked, faint as a needle's prick. That single sound was enough. The bloodhound let out a long howl. Hayes shuddered, melting into the shadows. The room reeked of leather and gunpowder. Hunting rifles hung on the walls, and a bookshelf towered to the ceiling. The judge loved stalking beasts and preaching his brand of justice, the kind that ground men like Hayes to dust. He knew his target slept on the second floor, but the shortest path was always the most trapped. Hayes didn't take the main stairs. Instead, he slipped through a narrow hallway to the cellar. Down there, the breath of oak-aged whiskey wafted like a slumbering spirit. He traced the rear door's bolt, easing it open just enough to wedge in a leather pouch. Inside, a flask of pine oil and a coil of rope. When the job was done, he'd need a clean exit, and this cellar door was his lifeline. Back on the ground floor, Hayes pressed against an oak-paneled wall, ears straining. Claws clicked on hardwood. The bloodhound was sniffing. He held his breath, sliding into a blanket closet near the hall. Camphor fumes stung, choking a cough in his chest. The dog's shadow passed, its tail brushing the door. That moment stretched longer than any storm-tossed voyage on the Chesapeake. Then the pendulum clock chimed. Tick, tock, tick. The dog moved on. Hayes exhaled, a wisp of breath thin as smoke. On the second floor, Persian rugs swallowed his steps. The bedroom door stood ajar, a sliver of lamplight spilling through. Hayes slid his dagger's tip into the gap, flicking the latch. Too simple for a house rigged like a fortress. Half his gut screamed. The final trap always hides where you let your guard down. But he pushed the door. Judge Merrick wasn't in bed. He sat in an armchair by the window, half his face veiled in pipe smoke. A crimson wool robe draped his gaunt frame. His voice rasped softly. I knew someone would come. I just didn't know which night. Hayes froze, dagger tip dipping to the floor. For the first time in his blood-stained career, the target was waiting, unafraid. Merrick's eyes, cold as glass, pierced Hayes's memories, nights of shame, the fleeting screams of his past. Someone's settling a debt with my blood, are they? Fine, the judge said, setting his pipe on a tray. But before you do it, hear one last verdict. My own will. Hayes should have stabbed him. Every survival instinct roared. Hesitate a second, and you're dead. But something in the silver-haired man, maybe his eerie calm before death, rooted Hayes in place. Outside, the bloodhound howled again. A faint creak echoed from the back door. Someone else had entered the house. Hayes realized. This was the trap. His employer had lured him into a lock, waiting for him to pull the trigger so they could pull theirs on him. In a flash, Hayes hurled his dagger at the window. Glass shattered, shards raining into the garden. He grabbed a wooden chair, smashing it into the oil lamp. Flames flared like fury. Merrick jolted upright, but Hayes wasn't there to kill him. He needed a living hostage. He looped an arm around the judge, dragging him into the hall, then down the back stairs, tossing a heavy curtain over the fire to keep the house from burning down. In the cellar, the rear door yawned open, his precaution. But two figures loomed on the threshold, pistols cocked. Out of options, Hayes gripped Merrick as a shield, backing away. "Shoot," he growled, "and your bullets will rip through the golden heart of justice." Triggers clicked, then stilled. A flickering torch lit their faces, two men in tailcoats, groomsmen to a bloody wedding. Hayes hauled the judge through the wine tunnel, past towering oak barrels. Years of fighting drunken demons, and now liquor saved him. He twisted a barrel's valve, and aged bourbon gushed, turning the stone floor to ice. The tailcoats slipped, a pistol shot ringing off the vaulted ceiling. In the chaos, Hayes dragged Merrick through the rear door, plunging into the fog-chilled night, leaving behind a cellar thick with alcohol and gun smoke. On a deserted dock, Hayes bound the judge's hands with boat mooring rope. Merrick didn't resist, only asked, "Who's behind it?" Hayes stared at the inky water. A distant signal lamp swept a beam, catching his eyes. For the first time, they reflected something like regret. "You think I know?" he rasped. "In this country, names shift like the tides." He didn't kill Merrick. River patrols would find the judge at dawn, hoarse from shouting about a man deaf in his left ear. And Hayes? He shed his cloak, tossed his dagger into the James, and slipped onto a tobacco ferry heading north before sunrise. He'd drifted through countless cities, but each job only tightened the invisible ropes binding his life. For the first time, he wondered, if a hired killer refuses to kill, is there a way back? The river wind bit, carrying away the stench of bourbon and gun smoke. At the water's edge, train engine smoke traced gray streaks across a pink sky. Richard Hayes coughed, pulling his collar over his deaf ear, and trudged into a new journey, where an assassin might learn to defy a death sentence, only to find that, sometimes, defiance sends him sliding down the slope even faster. Can you ever imagine a quiet morning under a crystal-clear sky in Washington, D.C., America's capital, where the hurried roar of cars and honking horns fades away, leaving only the whisper of wind through the Capitol building and the rustle of leaves, like history murmuring its secrets? It's hard to picture, but once, in that very place, a woman shook the foundations of politics like Olympias, the queen of ancient Macedonia, who sent tremors through the axis of the Greek world. Forget the image of stern queens in golden crowns, standing silently behind kings in classical paintings. Olympias wasn't a marble statue. She was a raging storm, a provocative whisper, a haunting oracle that made an entire empire tremble. Before she was Olympias, she was Myrtale, a young princess born in the cold, rugged mountains of Georgia, not the lavish Georgia of America, but Epirus, an ancient Greek province where blue skies and white clouds cradled the majestic Pindus Range. The Epirote people prided themselves as descendants of Achilles, the Greek hero immortalized in Homer's Golden Age. And perhaps, whether the bloodline was real or not, Myrtale was steeped in that bitter ichor, fierce, proud, and burdened with restless doubts. Even in her childhood, Myrtale could never linger in the gentle embrace of youth. She was raised amid swirling rituals and prophecies, where every offering of flowers hid secret meanings about fate and ancient gods. Instead of sketching deer on walls, she was taught to read omens of supernatural creatures, to inhale the scent of incense ash, and to master the sacred art of using snakes in holy rites. Villagers believed that through this, Elmira, Olympias's mother, the chieftain, tapped into divine power, comforting her people about the future. And so, from a tender age, Myrtale felt the pull of a spiritual connection few could fathom. Picture the scene. A young girl with glossy black hair, eyes blazing like embers, standing in a silent temple. Around her, only flickering candles and dark snakeskins. This wasn't a moment from a children's fairy tale. It was the stage of a chilling drama. Darkness clinging tight, light pooling in patches, and soft chants echoing faintly. Legend tells that Myrtale once cradled snakes in her lap, letting them coil around her wrists like icy ropes, whispering their names as if hearing the stir of tormented souls. The Epirote clan believed that whoever commanded sacred serpents was forsaken by the gods, a power more terrifying than any battlefield strategy or sharpened spear. By the time Myrtale turned 16, the Macedonian Empire, under Philip II, a cunning, ambitious, and power-hungry king, set its sights on Epirus. Philip had heard of the princess with eyes deep as a grave, seeing her as a vital ally to conquer the treacherous mountain forests and pave the way for his army to reach mineral-rich lands. It's said that when Philip learned Myrtale dedicated herself to snake temples, joining rituals that even priests feared, he declared, "I need a wife with both heroic blood and a touch of mystic power." The journey to Samothrace was no sweet lover's getaway. It was a grand expedition, draped in banners, with drums and royal standards, leaving Epirote nobles awestruck and uneasy. Myrtale was no shy maiden. She faced the Macedonian prince with a defiant gaze, piercing the souls of the high and mighty. Some claimed that on their wedding night, thunder cracked as if Zeus himself struck near Mount Olympus, or even the East Branch Delaware in America. Lightning flashed through the Crown Tower's windows, leaving Rensselaer's city suspended in a storm of wonder. Philip later recalled, "I thought Zeus had slammed his hammer into the earth, signaling a great upheaval. Indeed, when Myrtale stepped into the palace, I knew my fate was bound to hers." From that moment, Myrtale was no longer a child. She became Olympias, named for the goddess she revered, the one who birthed the notion of sacred power. She wasn't just Philip's wife, but a messenger of ancient temples, carrying a prophecy. Her child, if born, would weave a global empire. Rumors spread through Pella's capital. Some said Olympias dreamed of lightning piercing her womb, kindling a sacred flame. Others swore Philip dreamt of a golden lion tearing at his wife's side. True or not, those visions became legend, etching into Macedonian belief. This child is more than royal blood. It's a divine envoy. When Queen Olympias carried Alexander, the kingdom quaked with chaos. Philip, fresh from brutal wars, now faced sharing his throne with an illegitimate son, or so rival wives whispered. Attilus's daughter and Cleopatra Eurydice, both Macedonian nobles, awaited a pure prince, for in local aristocrats' eyes, only a true Macedonian heir deserved the crown. Olympias knew this, so she didn't sit idly in her jeweled chambers. She ordered rituals, summoned religious festivals, and wielded her influence to sway opinion. "This child is Zeus's son," she murmured to nearby lords. She conjured visions, orchestrated dreams, convincing all that Alexander was chosen above any other lineage. Yet Olympias's love for her son wasn't mere superstition. It was the strategy of a shrewd politician. By placing Alexander on the throne, she secured his life and her own deep-rooted power. Her whispers echoed from temples, silencing opposition. To deny Alexander was to defy the gods. Generals, once commanding armies, bowed to the mythic force Olympias meticulously crafted. Royal ceremonies blazed on, chapels hissed with incense smoke, sacred snakes coiled around goddess statues, and when Alexander was born, oracles roared in dreams. Philip clumsily warned, "This court doesn't run on dreams," he told his wife, voice thick with wine. "I need a real son, not a wax figure." Olympias only smirked. "Your kingdom stands on swords. This boy will stand on a spear forged by gods." Alexander grew not only under Aristotle, the great philosopher, but in the shadow of a rival mother. Olympias lived in constant unease, fearing every treacherous breath from the court. She didn't just hunt Philip's later wives, obstacles to her son's bloodline. She monitored every chronicle, every ode praising Philip. Ancient scribes apologized for suggesting Alexander might be another ally's son, swiftly banished to desolate forests. She sowed such paranoia that when Philip built a new palace chamber, masons dared not hammer too loudly, lest the sound summon her spectral judgment. When Alexander took his first steps, Olympias didn't play the doting mother. She orchestrated rituals and triumphal hymns. Epirote elders trekked to the palace, bowing to her, begging for a shred of her heroic maternal grace. Old men whispered, "She moves her son like a sacred chess piece," while power-hungry nobles shrank from challenging her. Macedonia's palace became an endless drama, with Olympias as director and star, while Philip scrambled as a supporting actor, managing the chaos below. But power never rests easy. Philip took more wives, forged new alliances, and ignored his queen's counsel. Cleopatra Eurydice, a young, beautiful princess, Alexander's cousin, was welcomed to court. Olympias seethed, but didn't just growl behind curtains. She waged an invisible rebellion. At night, she had candles lit before Cleopatra's bed, sent zealous village women to taunt with threats, leaving the new wife cowering like frayed silk. Rumors of tragedy spread by court jesters reached Philip's ears, driving him mad with rage, until Leon, Cleopatra's son, stopped eating. Without a formal accusation, Olympias boxed Cleopatra and her newborn daughter into a tomb of whispered malice. Soon after, mother and infant died wretchedly, amid the ashes of horrific secrets. Ahead of Olympias lay not glory, but death. Behind her stood a young Alexander, worshipped by all classes. Before her, crowds revered her myth. She'd woven a blazing tapestry of power, nurturing dreams of a mighty kingdom. But at night, when torches dimmed, her shadow lingered in marble corners, a living ghost of legend, never fading. Olympias's story was just beginning when Philip fell to a traitor's spear at a wedding, when Alexander, bearing mythic blood, marched onto the world stage. But for now, remember one thing. Beneath the luxurious silk, beyond the glorious tale, lies a wounded soul, a scar that could belong to anyone, anywhere, even in that radiant Capitol building. That is the true legacy, sacred power bleeding on cold stone. When news of Philip II's assassination, during preparations to invade Persia, reached Pella, a city like an ancient Washington, D.C., with stone columns and royal statues standing in place of the Capitol and White House, the entire kingdom fell silent. That night, as Philip departed, Olympias had no time to sigh in grief. She saw only the murky future of a boy not yet full grown. Alexander, stationed in Lafon, now Albany, New York, was summoned to return at once to claim the throne. The teenage prince, still reeling from the clang of bloodied swords, was thrust into a political maelstrom, like a young president anointed to lead America through a global financial crisis. Philip's old entourage scrambled, swapping camels for swift war horses, escorting Alexander across the vast plains of Lydia, akin to Washington's ancient floodplain. Along the way, envoys and lords waited, whispering, "Your mother, Olympias, holds the throne stripped from Philip." Then, eyeing the lanky youth, his heroic blood glinting faintly in eyes deep as the sea. Beside Alexander, clad in a short, tattered tunic, he sometimes paused to stare at a roadside azalea, imagining he could tend an entire kingdom soon to be his. With each hoofbeat, Alexander felt the world tremble. At 18, he'd never tasted the loneliness of a father's death. His father had fallen mid-stride, like a senator collapsing during a heated committee debate, leaving no one time to react. Now, the throne and its power crashed onto him like a nightmare. Alexander had to atone for his mother, sacrifice friends, and even his only legitimate half-brother, Philip III, born to Cleopatra Eurydice, whom courtiers mocked as a puppet king, a placeholder for Olympias and her palace allies. Olympias shed no tears. She didn't clutch her chest or wail in mourning. She merely climbed to the palace's highest tower, gazing toward Philip's unfinished warships. The cold stone walls seemed to whisper, "Whoever masters the mystic serpent controls the kingdom." She spread word, and factions seized the moment. Philip III is unfit for the throne. Alexander is the gods' decree. Each whispered pebble tossed into the courtyard wove a spider web of rumors across Pella, from the public assembly, where citizens gathered to hear royal edicts, to the holy chambers of Zeus's temple, as if the Washington Monument were suddenly inscribed with divine protection from Christian shrines. Alexander returned, his steps frail, but his gaze resolute, like morning mist on the Rocky Mountains. In a faded velvet cloak, iron spurs atop his curly hair, he saw Olympias and sensed the throne teetering beneath him. She didn't shout in welcome. Instead, Olympias spoke softly. "The hour has come, my son. Today you are Macedonia's king, but tomorrow you must prove you're worthy." Alexander didn't reply at once. He bowed his head, counting heartbeats in his throat. 18 pulses, 18 years of life. But above all, a rhythm asking, "Who am I in this lineage? Does Zeus favor me, or am I just a spring breeze lost in the palace?" Before the coronation, an emergency council convened, like a winter Congress meeting in D.C., unnoticed by reporters, with 6 veteran generals, 3 of Philip's loyalists, and local nobles. They could watch Alexander, but Olympias oversaw them. She stood poised behind her son, eyes fixed on torchlight flickering across the wooden throne table. She said nothing, but her mythic aura was ready. Wine was poured for offerings, a sacred bull was released in the courtyard, and priestesses chanted of the boy bearing a nation's fate. In this vivid scene, the kingdom shifted to Olympias's whispers, not the blare of royal banners. The coronation unfolded under blazing sun, not dazzling like Washington's sky, but a golden glow laced with dew-soaked cobwebs. Alexander ascended the steps, touched the throne's base, and faced those shaping his future. Nobles on the right, envoys from northern tribes on the left, and above, vaulted domes echoing every plea. May the heavens bless you. As he raised his head, a cloud drifted, revealing a half-moon like a cracked mirror, heralding the coming night and the shadow of a looming power struggle. The hunt began right after the ceremony. The phoenix, barely grasping its pearl, showed its wings, and factions tore at each other. Antipater, one of Philip's 6 loyal generals, declared himself regent, claiming temporary rule for Alexander, like a House Speaker steering Congress when a president vanishes. Antipater boasted, "With my campaigns across 4 seas, I'll secure the throne for the young lord." But Olympias wasn't fooled. She stood calmly by the river, reminding her son that Persia's sky hadn't yet faded, and she still held the banner. She allied with Cassander, a powerful nephew of another old general, forming a new coalition. Rumors spread like New Year's Eve chaos. Antipater wants to carve up power, but Olympias seeks true rule. Bets were placed on who'd prevail: Olympias's pure-blood faction or Antipater's feudal establishment. Antipater, leaning on experience, stationed troops in Chalcidice, ancient Susquehanna's fork, a fertile land of estates, where his soldiers, famed for crushing Appalachian rebels, were poised to silence anyone shouting, "Alexander's too young." At night, their camp glowed with swaying lanterns, eerie as ghosts, sparking villagers' cries. Old Antipater will weigh the young king's soul on his scales. But Olympias, quick-witted, sent a messenger with words from famed oracles. "Only my son is divinely protected. Whoever threatens Alexander's life will lose their own children." Tensions peaked when Cassander, ever ambitious, vowed to bring Meriones, a young general once pledged to marry his son to Alexander, into Olympias's ranks as a royal protector. Meriones, shunned by Philip for preaching "the king is divinely blessed," now joined Olympias to secure his family's legacy. Cassander and Meriones quietly rallied old generals, promising that though Alexander was young, he'd grow through supernatural calling, and the kingdom couldn't fall to Antipater's armed faction. Meanwhile, Olympias summoned the Council of Elders by the Axios River, like the Delaware along Philadelphia, holding a rite for Zeus, invoking support from nearby tribes. Even in distant Epirus, word spread. Olympias was filing a claim with northern tribes, ready to call in reinforcements if needed. Antipater realized Olympias wasn't bluffing. She wasn't just a spectral force. She was lightning striking every fierce corner. On a windy autumn afternoon, as red maple leaves withered along the avenue, the factions clashed at Thermopylae, where Leonidas and thousands of Spartans once stood. This time, no 100 shielded soldiers formed ranks. Only a few dozen of Antipater's cavalry massed on one side of the pass, while Olympias's side, under a serpent-emblazoned flag symbolizing silent power, fielded fewer men but burned with unbreakable faith. Before the charge, Olympias handed Alexander a sword still warm from his youth. "Take it, my son. Steel isn't true strength. What we wield is the god's prophecy." Alexander drew the blade slowly, its edge flashing a blinding streak. He gazed into the eyes of the young soldiers across the field, seeing doubt mingled with awe. As horns and drums blared, both sides collided like polar bears battling over drifting ice. Swords clashed, hooves thundered, and amid the dust, Olympias shouted a prayer. "Let this kingdom's voice echo beyond the seas." A shock unfolded. Meriones, pledged to secure his son's future, shed his armor, raced to Antipater's side, aimed a pistol at his old ally's hip, and spat, cold as poison. "Alexander isn't just Olympias's son. He's the envoy of the divine." Stunned soldiers surged to Olympias's side, fierce as a strange wind sweeping the pass. Antipater, shouting party slogans, stumbled and fled. In a flash, the chasm of power was settled. Olympias embraced Alexander, tears streaming amid the sword's radiant glory. He began to rule, not from a cushioned throne like other youths, but steering a political storm, steady as a carved stone monument, though barely 19, his beard yet to sprout. Olympias didn't bask in triumph. She stood behind, her face blending satisfaction with quiet foresight of days ahead. She knew power could be fleeting. Today's victory might become tomorrow's fiercer betrayal. She closed her eyes, breathed the mountain air, and wrapped her arms around Alexander. "You've passed the first trial, but the journey is long, longer than the eternal Appalachians. Remember, never forget your mother, never forget the prophecies, and above all, never forget you are Alexander of Macedonia." In that moment, Olympia sparked a revolution of the mind. From a mother veiled behind the throne, to a son bearing hope, to mythic tapestries paving the way, Pella transformed into a relic etched with the power of whispers, like a miracle lodged in the people's hearts, waiting to be carved into history. And in the distant northern lands, echoes of war seeped into wooden homes and valleys, priming for the cataclysms Alexander would unleash. Campaigns conquering Persia, Egypt, and the Hindu Kush, a colossal symphony sweeping Asia. But first, Alexander had to savor each sweet drop of power, and Olympias ensured he tasted it all. The moment Alexander first set foot on the sandy banks of the Ganges, like waves crashing onto the shores of Lake Minnetonka in modern-day Minneapolis, marked the beginning of the end for Olympias's power. News of his crusade sweeping across Asia reached Macedonia like a Dakota desert storm. From northern Kashmir to the Punjab plains, Alexander's name thundered. But for Olympias, it was a warning that the bricks of the house she'd painstakingly built could crumble at any moment. After his grand campaign in Egypt, Alexander founded Alexandria, a dazzling echo of Washington, D.C., but grander, with lush gardens, marble corridors, and inscriptions blending Greek, Egyptian, and Sanskrit. At his lavish feasts, crowds reveled, offering sacrifices of lions, elephants, and prized horses. Yet on the road back, he sent urgent letters to Olympias. "Mother, this world is vaster than we imagined. People don't just crave bread and wine, they yearn to live under the shadow of myth. I fear I've sown seeds in them I cannot uproot. Olympias nodded as she read, her eyes brimming with tears. She wondered, is the power I gave my son a blessing, or has it orphaned him in this boundless world? She sat by the palace's artificial lake, water rippling under the vaulted roof, echoing like the prelude to guilt and pride. Olympias knew. Alexander shone like a springtime north, but he was fragile as unmelted ice. As Alexander marched through the Karakoram forests, akin to the Rockies on a modern map, Olympias quietly fortified her influence in Macedonia. She drafted a royal mandate to General Antipater, instructing, "Preserve order. Every house must swear against rebellion's seeds." She leaned on Philip's rusted sword, tracing its golden lion engraving, a relic from the day her father brought her to Pella's palace. Her heart swelled with pride and dread. Alexander was drifting far, and rival forces like Cassander or Irene's Venom, a former wife of Philip III, could rise like wildfires in a desert. But Olympias didn't wait idly for bad news. She summoned dozens of envoys, each clutching a jade amulet inscribed with Son of Zeus, dispatching them to every small town. They promised farmland, crop subsidies, and reminded all, Alexander isn't an ordinary prince. He's the light that guides. Meanwhile, his fame spread, but court factions bickered in the shadows. Old foxes waved banners, grumbling, "We need an emperor here, ruling in reality, not a painted king." Their scheming grew vicious. After years of conquest, Alexander returned to Babylon, his grandest home, where 7 stone lions guarded the gates like Capitol Hill's old monuments. As he stepped onto the stone platform, 5 colored lanterns flickered, glinting off his gold-scaled, jewel-encrusted armor. He furrowed his brow, recalling his mother's words, "Your vast world is a trap disguised as a crown." Alexander felt like the final wave in a storm, towering, yet finite. He gazed at the sunset spilling over stone walls, its hues shifting from purple to pitch black, like Minnesota's winter sky. He sighed. "I've won a kingdom for the world, but I cannot claim peace for myself." In Pella, Olympias heard Alexander was drinking heavily, struck by a high fever. She pleaded with priests, "Don't let the gods take my son." But the gods ignored her. Word came swiftly, like a messenger's gallop. Alexander was shivering, possibly with typhoid. Olympias sent medicated wine, pouring packets of angelica-scented herbs into her son's hands, as she once did with sacred snakes. But the remedies smoldered like dying embers, powerless against the fever. The day Alexander fell, his sword barely drawn, Olympias's cry wasn't one of sorrow, but of rage that tore the air. She ordered the city sealed, taverns shut, and temples guarded, tasking her daughter Cleopatra, Alexander's sister, with protecting the fragile throne of her grandson, Alexander IV. She proclaimed, "Power never dies." But in her heart, power dissolved like a blizzard in spring's uncertainty. A cadre of elders rose, shouting, "Olympias and her heir are mere shadows. True power has slipped to another." Within a year, Macedonia plunged into chaos. The successors, Antipater, Cassander, Lysimachus, Ptolemy, each claimed to safeguard the royal future, but they splintered, hiding daggers behind bright smiles. Olympias, like a wounded beast, clung to her Alexander's blood card, facing Cassander's army flooding in from Thessaly, akin to Pennsylvania. They branded her the Mad Mother and hunted her daughter Cleopatra, a girl stumbling into a world of violence. On a snowy night in Pella, as moonlight pierced the eucalyptus grove, Olympias and her few remaining generals stood at the palace's front hall. She told them, "If Cassander touches my grandson, Alexander's bloodline fades." Her words carried the weight of an American anthem, making soldiers tremble. But whispers against cannons were futile. Each general had their own field, and when the clash came, Cassander's command unleashed a flood. Soldiers surged, toppling the Black Horse banner. Olympias watched the chaos on the brick courtyard, bodies falling, knees buckling, alone in the encirclement. Cleopatra, her daughter, screamed, "Mother's love!" But before her cry could ring, chains silenced her, her voice fading like a wounded bird's. Olympias gave a faint, dazed laugh. "They think they'll punish me with her blood?" But in that smile, a glistening tear hid unbearable anguish. She was losing power, and soon her daughter. The final campaign began at a dawn chilled by northern winds, sharp as frostbite. Cassander, astride a lean horse, waved his overwhelming army forward, shouting, "Give them vengeance equal to the price she paid for slaughtering my family." He gave Olympias no chance to explain. Pella's palace was besieged. Cassander's troops crushed the guards, and they dragged her to the front platform, where night spiders lurked like a lone senator's desk. Olympias didn't drop her blade or scream. She stood tall, Philip's rusted sword dangling from her cloak, and scoffed, "I won't bow for you to see." But fate offered no choice. The power she'd wielded for 40 years, from little Myrtale immersed in snake rituals to the vengeful queen, ended amid blaring horns and drums. Cassander didn't execute her outright. He handed her to the families of those she'd condemned, letting them lash her with whips, pincers, and iron blades. Olympias knelt in muddy snow, silver hair straggling, eyes still smirking. "I'm only the shadow, not the tree they felled." Before the sword struck, Olympias turned to the pale sky, wondering, "How many myths did I sow? How many whispers still haunt the world's heart?" Her body was taken brutally, but Olympias's memory and the echo of her power never ceased to resound. They say, as her body lay in the courtyard, an eagle circled aimlessly, crying mournfully, like the symbol of her once mighty reign, now just a storm-battered shadow. Macedonia stood silent in the slow-falling snow, no one daring to ask. Life or death, victory or defeat, where is true power etched? The generals knelt before the throne, placing Alexander IV, a tiny child, ignorant of power, on a polished wooden seat. He quietly turned the bitter pages of history. 3 months later, he too was slain amid a rain of fire, like a flower crushed before it could bloom. Olympias was gone, but the house bearing her power, from mystic whispers to blood spilled on stone columns, still smoldered with incense. The people, instead of praising or cursing her, held only the image of a woman who fought for what she deemed sacred. But the world had changed. No room remained for ancient myths, only shattered specters of crowns. Imagine this. Amid the lingering ashes, Olympias's bony hands clutch at the void, as if grasping for the shadow she cast upon the world. The feudal kings around her merely shouldered debts, debts of vengeance, blood, and prophecy. None bold enough to stir hearts as Olympias once did. And now, in that once lush land where ceremonial drums once roared, only mournful lullabies remain. History no longer belongs solely to famed heroes, but to those behind them. The prophetic shadows, the fierce and ruthless souls across all ranks. Olympias, a life like a tempest, faded. Yet her voice, through every whisper, echoes faintly into this century, stirring those who dare face power and the loneliness behind it. As Macedonia still reeled from its 1,000-mile power struggles, another historical breeze quietly swept across the Mediterranean. The intoxicating breath of Crete, home to a once mighty civilization rivaling the Roman Empire to come. If you picture ancient Washington, D.C., its pillars casting shadows on a serene turquoise lake, then Knossos, the heart of the Minoans, was its primal blueprint. Here, power wasn't forged by brutal swords, but woven into every stone wall, every vibrant fresco, and the rhythm of a society that thrived in harmony with nature. Imagine a colossal palace rising amid a fertile plain, encircled by olive-drenched hills. Knossos wasn't a fortress for violence-hungry kings. It was a miniature city, sprawling under sunlight slanting through roof vents, scattering beams into sacred chambers, like the stained glass windows of St. Paul's Cathedral in Minnesota's Twin Cities today. The Minoans, following Egypt and Mesopotamia, built Knossos around 1900 BCE, a bustling hub with a labyrinth of corridors, skylights, olive oil cellars, and the world's first flush toilets. Modern visitors to Knossos's ruins often shiver at its seductive maze. They fear losing their way, yet they're captivated by frescoes of maidens vaulting over bulls, gulls soaring, and the labrys, the enigmatic double axe tied to religious rites. If you've seen the Frontenac relief in St. Louis, Missouri, with its chalice and staff, Knossos's equivalent was a golden double axe carved into stone, glinting like dolphin scales in the sun. Back then, the Minoans didn't obsess over amassing armies. They immersed themselves in art, craftsmanship, and maritime trade. Their vast output was olive oil, wild honey, and shimmering linen. Their sailboats, light as doves, skimmed waves, carrying cloth, pears, and honey to Ugarit, Babylon, and beyond. Crete was a Manhattan of the sea, busier than any 12th century Islamic trade port. Knossos, the pulse of Minoan society, embodied this world. It didn't just welcome merchants and priests, as Washington once did lobbyists. It was a temple to the fusion of humanity and nature. The Maiden and Bull fresco doesn't depict gore or mortal combat. It's a sacred ritual where a lithe girl in a gossamer gown dances atop a bull's back. Unlike Iowa's cattle, Knossos's bull symbolized vitality and fertility. It's like women in white dresses twirling by DC's reflecting pool, but deeper, mystical, as if each step reached the universe's soul. The tale of the Minotaur, a man-bull monster trapped in the labyrinth, fed Athenian youths, looms large. But Knossos holds no evidence of a beast's cage, no bat-filled pens or archaeological sparks of a vast underground maze. Instead, the Minoans built a 4-story palace with over 1,000 rooms, winding corridors, and sunlit courtyards, creating a labyrinth through sheer complexity. They didn't mean to house a flesh-eating monster. This was a sophisticated urban tapestry where humans, gods, and resources intertwined. Knossos' design wasn't plotted with mechanical blueprints. Its artisans, like ancient Greek smiths at Miami's St. Ignatius Forge, worked with hammers ringing year-round, not forging austere blades but crafting wide skylights to funnel fresh air into every room. They ingeniously built passive cooling. By day, deep cellars stayed crisp as a northern winter. By night, soft dew fell through roof slits, cooling lime walls. Walking Knossos' corridors, you'd hear air whistling through gaps, a whoosh like the city's own soundtrack, banishing damp odors from tiled floors. Visitors felt transported to an era where air conditioning wasn't machinery, but a dance of architecture and nature. At the heart of this stone giant stood the throne room, a grand chamber with a quartz stone throne fixed to the wall, flanked by alabaster benches carved with unicorns, mythical creatures akin to the Freedom Lion guarding Orlando's Federal Plaza. But Knossos' unicorn resembled a radiant bull, exuding an eagle's sacred aura. Some scholars believe this was the queen's throne, steering winds, harvests, and even lovers' fates. Power games at Knossos weren't the swords and political jabs of Washington. Power lived in frescoes blazing with 7 colors: tulip red, banana leaf green, blush white goddesses, jet black bull fur, and crystal glinting priestess robes. They believed if anyone dulled a blade, their king would rage, and storms would drown the crops, like Cahuilla priests in Riverside, California, drawing mud from the Santa Ana River to pray for rain. Blasphemers brought drought. From aqueducts to plumbing, Knossos was the Minoans' communal bakery. Water flowed, granaries brimmed with wheat, and guests from afar feasted on baked bread, goat cheese, and honeyed wine, much like lotus, noodles, and Côte du Rhône savored in New Orleans today. They lit lamps, revered sacred snakes, shoveled sand for mosaics, and crafted emerald-glazed pottery with intricate bee motifs. Knossos' symphony echoed across Crete. So why didn't such a marvel endure? Around 1450 BCE, Knossos fell silent. Greek legend claims Theseus, Prince Minos' son, and Princess Ariadne, who gave him thread to navigate the labyrinth, fled the palace, slew the Minotaur, and torched pottery and oil, reducing the maze to ashes. Yet modern archaeology shows no signs of war or raging fires. The ruins reveal only a faint ash haze, like misty smoke. The Thera, Santorini eruption around 1600 BCE unleashed tsunamis that swamped Crete's northern coast, wrecking ports, stripping trees, and ruining crops post-harvest. Fertile soil turned sour and salty. Trade routes to the mainland snapped, and the Minoans slowly lost their edge. The Mycenaeans, Greek kin from the mainland, swept through, and history blurred into memory. By the time Homer sang of Crete in his epics, Knossos lay under dust thicker than buffalo hide, a once proud legacy now a forgotten tale. Yet visit Knossos' ruins today, and as wind weaves through crumbled corridors, you'll feel the Minoans' echo, cool dampness from underground springs, a whoosh chime from lime walls, sunlight dancing on stylized bullhorn motifs, It's a chorus reminding us men may pass through history, crowns may sink in desert sands, but art and creation endure, awaiting those bold enough to turn memory's pages. And if you ever close your eyes to imagine an ancient Washington, D.C., with flower beds circling the Capitol, add Knossos, where no armies or armed might ruled, only the sound of water, the hues of frescoes, and light-piercing roofs. The Minoans taught history a lesson. The human heart is more complex than any stone wall, and our mark on the world lies not in wars, but in what we leave living on this earth. The moss-green ruins of Knossos remind us that, from medieval to ancient times, while violence clawed for cracks in city walls, war engineers cooked up the wildest contraptions to uproot houses from the earth. Yes, I'm talking about siege machines. Those lovable beasts of wood, iron, and rope, birthed by humanity solely to smash enemy ramparts to rubble. Let's start with the battering ram, the blood sprinkler of ancient warfare, as easy to picture as a heavy-duty truck slamming into a brick wall. In Egypt, Greece, and Rome, who hauled it? Simple. A crew of burly soldiers, draped in elephant-hide armor, gripping chains, eyes blazing with grit. They'd ram a crude log, often tipped with a sharp iron head, mounted on a wheeled frame. Then, in unison, they'd heave, brains chanting, "Bash, bash, bash," like a midnight karaoke showdown. The result? Walls cracked, stones popped loose, some tumbling into ditches. The sound alone chilled defenders' spines, the growl of wood pounding, the clink of falling tiles. And though cannons weren't yet born, it was enough to make hearts skip. But the ram was a bit basic. It hammered up close, not touching far-flung targets. Enter the catapult, the stone hurler, swaggering into the fray like a pricey bottle of wine at a dive bar feast. The Greeks had a prototype, giant bowstrings of twisted goat hair ropes, stretched tight, tethered to a long wooden arm. Cut the holding cord, and the arm whipped up, launching a rock the size of a stove, flattening watchtowers or roasting soldiers hugging the walls. Dubbed the giant crossbow, ballista, it could fire ebony bolts with laser-sharp tips, piercing iron shields and defenders' greed. Then Rome spiced things up with counterweight catapults, called onager or mangonel in Latin. Just crank a lever, step on a pedal, and whoosh! A boulder, needing half a dozen men to lift, soared like a modern gas bomb. The trick was sniffing out weak wall spots and hitting them dead on, not lobbing rocks like marbles into a stream. They'd smear turmeric on stones for flair, dazzling onlookers, then fire. In Jubba's city, screams erupted. "Gods, the wall's shaking, the pillars are trembling." Sure, engineers cursed when a rock veered into a nearby tent, smashing wine jugs, but the show was worth it. Next came the trebuchet, the onager's golden heir, a towering wooden beam, one end slung with a stone-filled basket, the other hooked to taut cables. Release the ropes, and the rock launched like a missile, scarier than slipping on a wet banana peel. Trebuchets doubled as grenade launchers. 100-pound stones carried flaming coal buckets or jars of quicklime, raining havoc on defenders who sobbed and wailed. Fire, smoke, and chaos screamed. Not just walls crumbling, minds too. A tale from Normandy during the Crusades claims one trebuchet was so massive, defenders heard its whine nightly, like a jet engine. Someone swore, It's like hell itself is landing any second. But wait. When walls loomed too tall, siege towers rolled in, like a proto-tank's blockchain cousin. Picture a 4-story wooden fortress, roofed to deflect arrow showers, rolling on wheels as big as tank gears, packed with archers and spearmen. Once near the wall, a drawbridge dropped from the top deck, and soldiers stormed across, like a semi-truck unloading a football team into a tight alley. Defenders, spotting it, didn't need catapults. The sight alone spiked their blood pressure. "They're gonna crush us!" Tower troops slashed wildly, snatching enemy helmets, spilling over walls. The battlefield soon brimmed with discarded helms, swords, and grenade-like debris. Think that's all? Nope. Below ground, there were tunnels. Siege mining was the stealthiest, most terrifying trick. Attackers burrowed under walls, propping tunnels with timber, then had slaves torch the supports. When the beams collapsed, the tunnel caved, yanking down the outer wall. During the 429 BCE siege of Plataea, Spartans used this, but Athenian defenders dug counter-tunnels, meeting them underground. They clashed in the dark, like a real-life Bleach episode. Screwdrivers versus short swords, earth trembling with dust and chaos. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, when towns stacked stone walls like Lego. Attackers turned to Greek fire, a baffling liquid that clung to stone, wood, and even burned on water. Imagine pouring gasoline into a lake, flicking a lighter, and watching it blaze, choking the air. Ships around Constantinople's harbor, the Byzantine Boston or New York of its day, quaked at the sight. Infantry gaped, sweating. One drop, and we're toast. When fire wizards weren't available, defenders boiled oil. Not digging risky tunnels, they dumped cauldrons of sizzling oil, water, or scorching sand on besiegers. Picture soldiers scaling ladders, hit by boiling oil, glowing like golden turkeys, shrieking as if swallowed by flames. It was the moment that erased all doubt. Help! Why's this battle popping like corn kernels? In desperation, defenders dug countermines, reversed tunnels to intercept attackers' burrows. They'd wrestle in pitch black, swinging shovels and arrows, torches flickering on grim faces, eyes glinting with dread, like a horror flick unfolding. A funnier tale comes from Stirling, Scotland, where the English built a monster trebuchet called War Wolf, terrifying Scots. They surrendered before Warwolf fired a single shot. Rumors claimed one swing of its frame could erase the castle. It was like riding a bus about to crash into a skyscraper. No collision yet, but you're already drenched in cold sweat. Eventually, gunpowder hit Europe, and everything changed. Cannons roared, shredding walls easier than silkworms, turning century-old wooden siege tech into antiques. Fortified walls became costly relics, fit for tourist tickets. Tunneling and tower building morphed into digging trenches and anti-tank ditches. The new era brought artillery, rocket launchers, drones, but the siege spirit lingered, blending weapons with psychology, sowing fear. Tools changed. The game didn't. Visit Windsor Castle today, its stalwart walls now a resort attraction, and if you listen closely, you'll hear echoes of wall breakers, the ram's thud, and the trumpets of siege engineers penning their manifesto. Tremble at walls, but rest easy. We've got ways to crack them. In any era, Siege warfare is a dance of ideas and violence, where tech evolves, but the goal stays fixed. Victory not just by muscle, but by reading, exploiting, and amplifying human fear. So, if you're curled up, stretching your spine in bed, ready to drift into dreams, spare a thought for those engineers who poured their lives into sawdust, hammer clangs, and fire just to build a giant wooden mill to shatter walls. Sure, it's clunky, crude, but it'll make your heart skip. Behind every gate bolted with extra hemp lies cunning deep enough to unravel the soundest sleep. And when you dream of lumbering siege towers, Greek fire-licking walls, or rams bleating thump-thump under a feverish sun, wake with a sly grin. These are just history's scattered crumbs. But who knows? One night, you might dream you're wielding a shovel, tunneling under a rampart, flashing a smirk. Because siege warfare is imagination's playground, and you're the lucky spectator watching from a dream. Sleep tight, then. Come morning, hug your pillow, chuckling that you're not stuck juggling boulders and wooden cranes. The breeze outside will lull you while I revisit tales of Knossos, Olympias, and the cicada hum of rams roaring in the night, waiting for the moment you jolt awake, laughing softly at history's fiery pulse. The final roar of a cannon echoing through crumbling city walls marked the end of an era for those savage machines. Battering rams, catapults, trebuchets. From that moment, when gunpowder replaced wooden rams, Europe's once proud fortifications rewrote the script of siege warfare. No more squinting to smash walls with grinding mills or Greek fire, but a fleeting boom of cannonballs shaking entire hills. Think you're safe assuming those tactics are ancient history? Picture a family in a stone house in Normandy, parents hauling sacks of grain from the yard, when suddenly a distant boom rattles the air. The door slams, thud, and the roof quakes, trembling, trembling. Then silence falls, dust clouding their eyes. The mother whispers, "Should we leave?" The kids tug at their father's sleeve. "Dad, what was that?" A peaceful life shatters like a crisp cookie under teeth. That's how siege warfare evolved, from sweat-soaked men pitching tents and digging tunnels, to engineers glued to the black box of cannons, to an age of drones buzzing skies, dropping bombs like drunken flies. Yet, for all the new tools, the core remains unchanged, heralding tomorrow with fire and smoke, sowing fear in enemies' hearts, forcing them to bow or cower. Every civilization, from Minoans to Romans, knew this. Power isn't just steel. It's the ability to strike at human will. If you're wrapped in blankets, slipping into dreams, let your mind drift to a colossal trebuchet, shouldering 1,000-pound stone, crashing against a city wall, shaking the earth like a glass cathedral. The whistle of rocks soaring over ramparts sings like the prelude to a chaotic symphony, a score even grand basilicas shy from playing. It's easier to imagine if you recall a glass cup shattering on a wooden floor. Now amplify it 100-fold, adding black smoke and the acrid scent of scorched gravel. Over centuries, people realized it wasn't just about who fires next, or who swings the biggest log. They could sit at a table, negotiate each stone, divvy up rations between attackers and the besieged. Even modern armies echo this old wisdom. You can't keep shooting forever. You need to barter for shelter, weapon caches, even medicine for foes. Yet, no matter how calm the truce, the sleep of those guarding the walls stays haunted. Will that boy with the water jug smirk wickedly? Will fire erupt from hidden oil barrels below? Before gunpowder, lives in walled cities hung on planks and ropes, sturdy through winter. But one theoretical rain of explosions could turn battlefield maps to soggy pulp. Truth is, humans crave violence. Terrified, yet enthralled by the chance to witness grandeur. A wall collapsing without fanfare. Chaos exalting the raw simplicity of instinct. So, as you curl tighter, letting cryptic nightmares seep into your dreams, picture this: a massive cannon, tons heavy, wheels creaking, barrel bellowing smoke, then boom, a blast rattling the air. When the sky quiets, only dust and the screams of those too slow for the bunker remain. You'll glimpse the bitter irony of war, not spears or shields, but towering fears decide victory. And finally, let sleep carry you gently, like a midnight ferry gliding from New Orleans to distant Biloxi. Yet in your soul, the cannon's bass hum lingers, a final bum of drums, reminding you that, no matter how modern the world, human sleep bears silent burdens heavier than we know. A strange breeze, a whoosh past your window, is enough to stir memories of millennia of sieges, war's quiet nightmares lurking in the subconscious, waiting to take shape when you can't duck away. Don't fret too much, though. If cannons don't yet thunder in your dreams, you're lucky. And if they do creep in, flash a faint smile. Smoke, fire, but I'm still dreaming. Only then can we sink deep, knowing the world's clamor, for now, is just a kite tethered in the night. When the thunder of the last cannon faded into history, and the smoke of trebuchets and catapults became mere echoes in museum halls, the shadow of war's labyrinth still crept into every pocket of peace. Everyday life often mirrors a slow siege, whispers behind backs, policies sealing borders, rivalries chasing allies or compromises. All hinge on the same medieval principle: master fear and outwit your foe in their imagination. Picture a family nestled by the Rocky Mountains. Neighbors like an opposing army, not hauling battering rams, but invading sleep with roaring car engines, drilling that stinks of garlic or other subtle jabs. These are today's wall breakers, quieter but sharp. A mouse click, a late-night call, enough to shatter your home's safe door. In the last century, soldiers swapped wooden crossbows for cannons that could blast through 2-meter walls. Farms no longer have thatched roofs, but electric fences in Kansas, fortified like ancient ramparts. Only now, barbed wires hum with current, jolting intruders' hearts, not just sparking screams, but stopping pulses. Fear doesn't come from mines or creaking mills anymore. It's a faint electric buzz that knocks you back, clutching your doorknob. Then there are modern siege towers, skyscrapers with hundreds of floors, housing police, Capitol guards, private security, cameras, and satellites. Invaders must climb a gauntlet of security rungs. As you sleep, a single email crashing your inbox can rob your rest. These are the soldiers in the tower. No horses or swords, but alarms blaring, leaving you jittery, unsure where the wall even stands. When guided missile cannons emerged mid-last century, people sighed in relief. ancient stone walls, meters thick, lost their worth. Many believed they could blast any barrier, from Cuba's Atlantica to the walls dividing hearts. But as digital roars replaced deafening blasts, we learned, as long as space exists, new walls rise. Not brick now, but cloud data, layered passwords, antivirus shields, and hackers, quietly menacing, steadfastly defending, leaving us wondering whether to sleep or stay vigilant. So, are you choosing to sleep or stay awake? When night falls, kids in Appalachia, like northern Georgia's valleys, huddle by windows, hearing logging trucks growl like ancient trebuchets. Adults pat their shoulders. Don't worry, the world's quiet, and we've got ways to keep it out. But as the city dozes, with streetlights flickering like sentries, a strange calm settles. You're just a small wall, unharmed if it shifts. Imagine a closed laptop, its webcam seemingly asleep, firewall supposedly airtight. Yet one stray line of code slips through, toppling the system, like a siege tunnel under the sea, springing a leak, flooding the ramparts. Come morning, you boot up, only to find you've woken a nameless foe, all for skipping a software update. In the kitchen, a sizzling pan is a modern cannon. Toss in breaded meat, spark the flame, and the hiss mimics monstrous Greek fire. Heat rises, aromas invade, turning the kitchen into a culinary battlefield. But beware, one misstep, a jealous tweak to the recipe, and the pan erupts, the room a fortress at midnight. Lights out, only the crackle of burning oil, startling you awake. The modern world's just slicker. No wooden mills, but subtler grinders sweep your mind at night. No one shouts, "Open the gate," but phishing scams knock. No catapults hurl stones, but virus emails and Trojans silently charge, crumbling systems like walls felled by hidden tunnels. Here's the secret, though. The key to escaping this maze lies in your mind. Learn to chuckle at every boom from your phone, set passwords long yet memorable, check software updates weekly. Then, even if a million virtual cannons roar, you'll drift off smiling. Sleep isn't just fleeing reality, it's recharging, building the sturdiest siege tower. Faith that walls or hackers be damned, you'll rise, repair, and carry on. So lie still, pull the blanket to your shoulders, close your eyes, and imagine. Mice scurry through Knossos' ruins, scattering shadows of Greek fire. Rusted cannons, now museum relics. A soft breeze teases your curtains, urging you past rubble to a secret tunnel into dreams, where no mills grind, no rams batter, only steady breaths linger, faint smoke dissolving on the ceiling. And if a faint knock echoes, don't jolt awake. It's just the wind brushing the wall, reminding you that, however the world's besieged, there's always a hidden hatch for those who grin in the dark, and that hatch is your sleep. From the dusty haze of Knossos to the final screech of cannons echoing off city walls, we've journeyed through eras of siege warfare, from wooden mills, battering rams, and catapults to roaring artillery, then drifting into the digital age with cloud fortresses. But tonight, on a soft bed in the suburbs of Seattle or Missouri, you bear no burden of defending ramparts. Just close your eyes, take a slow breath, and let your mind follow the next tale of tranquil nights laced with the sizzle of a cooking pan. Picture a skillet glowing hot, oil bubbling, wafting dreamy steam, like the faint warmth of ancient Greek fire. But instead of a threatening blaze, it's the promise of a savory dinner. Meat sizzling, spices swirling, enough to loosen your fingers from the keyboard, forgetting unanswered emails and app updates blinking for attention. This kitchen hum is the pack horse of old catapults. Its crackle won't breach walls but warms the heart, tugging at you in the fading chill of dusk. Meanwhile, the world outside keeps tunneling through every wall, now skyscrapers, now network firewalls, now Texas graveyard concrete. But you're inside, cocooned in a fortress called thin blanket and soft mattress, replacing the hemp layers of ancient bulwarks. Your hair may be tangled from a hectic day, but with a few steps into pillows, you'll feel sleep's breath, gentle as Lake Michigan's ripples under a sunset glow. On this journey, you may have flinched at tales of gates splintered, tunnels dug beneath, or rams pounding, sounds that quickened your pulse. But now, as you recline, your heartbeat slows, and the story softens. Weary rams and mills collapse, leaving only the earth's sigh. Each sigh is a quiet lullaby, cradling you, whispering that life is long, and deep within, you're as serene as a potato nestled in warm soil. Imagine a small Appalachian town, night falling, with just a few dim yellow lights. In a creaky wooden house, an old-timer sits by the hearth, spinning yarns of rams smashing boulders like a western flick. Kids curl up, eyes drooping, listening to their father's voice, but soon his footsteps on the floorboards pause. The children have slipped into sleep. That hearth of memory is the final gate, where one step carries you past cannons at the door, cloud strategies, and tangled cyber defenses. As long as war's fear haunts dawns, even after cannons fall silent, walls persist in the mind. You fret over tweet likes, inbox pings, or a phone buzzing at midnight. But set the phone down, close your eyes, and you escape that virtual maze. The labyrinth shrinks to a cookie no one clicks. The only sound is your steady breath, rhythmic as an ink pump, circulating warmth, soothing every tired cell. Even if your shoes by the door are scuffed, caked with road dust, you needn't step out again. Let your feet sink into warm blankets, the plush quilt hugging your shoulders, like sipping hot chocolate after the last class. Its warmth seems fleeting but lingers in your heart, sparking tenderness, melting yesterday's knots. In a vibrant corner of New Orleans, old houses stand besieged by mournful jazz drifting from nearby lounges. Drunk patrons stumble through, scarves fluttering, ducking into bars to smoke. It's no war, just a gentle storm stirring your soul. But close the window, draw the curtains, and all that remains is the rustle of trees, the world's whisper. Rest easy, life's long, just sleep. As your eyes begin to flutter shut, let Knossos blur, its walls bare, frescoes faded, bull horns unadored, stranded in a silent dusk. That scene is as soft as a weathered storm door by Lake Tahoe, reminding you that all things pass, only breath and sleep endure. If you dream of clashing wooden mills, wake with a knowing smile. That nightmare's just a small drill, teaching you not everyone's brave enough to smash a broom to build a flood wall. Today's sleek cannons can't easily pierce true sleep, not if you chant the spell. No mill outweighs a warm blanket and peaceful rest. And one more thing. If you hear a faint doorbell in the haze, don't stir. It's no visitor, just an old echo of siege machines settling into slumber. Stretch out, embrace your pillows, and in this moment, you're an impregnable fortress. The final stronghold is faith that, no matter the world's clamor, you'll sleep soundly, like a lamb dreaming of boundless meadows. So shed all strategies, all fears, and let tranquil sleep draw you into the softest depths of the unconscious. As you dream, float in a space free of gunpowder's stench or creaking siege towers. Just the faint hum of falling leaves, the night's sigh, enough to ferry you to the shores of beautiful dreams. As night unfurls across the vast sky, the tales of wooden mills, catapults, and Olympias's reign, seemingly faded, still curl into our minds like wisps of smoke. But tonight, on a cozy bed in Houston or Portland, you needn't fret over any city walls. Instead, let your soul drift to an ancient city under a sliver of moonlight, where the footsteps of nameless assassins, lurking commands, and rumors once stirred the night breeze. Picture Washington, D.C. today. But in that dark night, stripped of neon glow, with only low houses and the drip of dew on window panes. In that moment, Richard Hayes, or any hired killer, grips a dagger, not to slay, but to remind himself that life isn't just blood and glory. It's as if, closing your eyes, those traces of violence become old stories, letting you dream of something deeper. Gentle hands guarding your sleep. As you slip into dreams, your mind wanders to ancient Pella, where Olympias once laughed at throne seekers. You think the gods favor only one bloodline? She saw through plots and armies, glimpsing a world beyond the night's wars. Behind every city wall, there's a smile or a tear perched midway, proof that, though power fades, a mother's love and faith in the sacred endure. And when the tale journeys to Crete, to a Knossos radiant in sunlight, you can almost hear the Minoan priestesses' steps. They bore no spears, only blazing straw to scare invaders, summoning Zeus's thunder. Now, curled in your blanket, imagine a tranquil Cretan night, with only crickets chirping through the window. No bricks to fend off. Just close your eyes and float with their rhythm. That cricket song, soft enough to lull you into dreams, hums, while the old catapult, now a relic in Heracleon's museum, rests silent. Sometimes, in sleep, you might catch its faint whir, but instead of a massive stone shattering walls, it's the pop of butter bubbles, reminding you dreams can bloom from small, tender things. The cannons outside, once mighty enough to quake cities, are now just rain tapping your window, waking you gently. Listen, not because it startles your heart, but because it sings a sweet lullaby. Tomorrow's not rushing in. Sleep deeply. In that slumber, you might recall Alexander by the Ganges, eyes misty in battle's haze. But now, you needn't collapse on scorching sand. Just let your body sink into soft bedding. On a quiet corner of Madison Avenue, someone's likely tallying fortresses to guard a building, when a locked door and alarm suffice. But you're asleep, cradled by sheets, untouched by sieges of force or stinging emails. Only your soft breath remains, like waves lapping a calm shore, whispering that war is past, sleep is tomorrow's kingdom. And if you dream of tunneling under a city wall, toppling barriers, pause upon waking. Isn't that just your mind digging into the subconscious, exploring inner fears? Instead of raising walls, make peace with them. Set candles atop, tuck a tiny cactus in the corner. Let them remind you that even the sturdiest ramparts have slits for light to spill through. You might dream of a colossal siege tower lumbering down Manhattan's streets, wheels groaning like they're begging for mercy. But when your room glows with lamplight through curtains, you're at peace. Your bedroom's a final stronghold. Let those walls stand, but don't let them block your embrace of the sheets. Tonight, you don't guard with crossbows or swords. Just lean into pillows, close your eyes, and admit that, though the world brims with schemes, in sleep, you're immortal for a moment, until the alarm clocks chime. If that bell rings too soon, smile. You've spent the night breaching your mind's maze, easing fears, realizing that, despite lingering worries, they can't invade your rest. Every mill, catapult, and assassin's signature yields to a miracle. You slept, and in dreams, you walked freely through every wall. So linger in slumber a bit longer, waking tomorrow refreshed. Perhaps, as your eyes open, the world has shifted. Cities fallen, cannons mere memories, and you, still lying there, smiling for conquering. Sleep itself. Last night, as you dreamed of final cannon blasts echoing like gentle thunder, we now arrive at the last tale, lifting the curtain on a scene both radiant and poignant, the melting of history's final city walls in our wandering journey through time. Across the vastness of ages, when artillery advanced to missiles piercing any rampart, people stopped building impregnable castles. Instead, they bet on the cover of night, passwords dozens of characters long and invisible electronic fences, every bit as grand as trebuchets of old. If rain pours over Philadelphia, you'll hear it patter on tin roofs, not stones crashing. Yet that rain's enough to make you curl up, reluctant to leave your bed. One midweek night in a Portland apartment, a coder jolted awake, spotting a security flaw. He flipped open his laptop, bleary-eyed, typing commands like fending off a medieval barrage. But soon he realized, the noisy world out there wields virtual siege towers, attacking with code, not oak or steel. He sighed, powered down, and dove back under the covers, because nothing cradles sleep like knowing those miles of cables are illusions. The warm, soft blanket, unmoved by any assault, is real. In a New Orleans basement, past generations once rigged wooden wheels as big as gutters to haul battering rams. Now, a fingertip on an app spins cameras to catch a forgotten bag at the door, and every plot, even spam emails disrupting sleep, is shot down with a click. Yet, the night breeze slips through window cracks, teasing thin curtains, whispering, no matter how advanced the tech, you're still besieged by wind, barking dogs, or your own heart racing through tangled dreams. It's curious to think, in an old Savannah, Georgia hotel, travelers might spot a creaky cell, where generals once stored miniature siege tower models. Now just splintered wood on a wall, It evokes an emperor plotting to hurl sacred fire from gunpowder nozzles, sowing fear in a fortress. You smirk. The world never runs out of tricks, from wooden mills to firewalls to Bluetooth speakers blaring warning, startling you awake. But you need no wizard scattering ashes, no crown invoking fire gods. Just close your eyes, breathe evenly, and drift into a hazy realm. In that moment, all defensive tactics and virtual attacks dissolve. You'll find the room silent, empty, save for your soft cough, an echo of a siege you've won. Victory through sleep, through serene detachment. Now, you recall Olympias, who sowed dread that kept Pella sleepless. Yet she taught that true power lies in capturing hearts, not gleaming swords under candlelight. If someone sneaks through a door's gap, not with a dagger, but to light a candle, you'd still feel safe. Fire isn't fearsome if it warms the soul, not burns down walls. You might dream of soldiers in ancient siege engines, shadowy figures, sweat-streaked, dusted with sawdust, now carved statues under a museum's dim golden light. You hear crowds cheer as a catapult hurls 100-pound stone, but the scene fades to ash, and all you catch is the steady breath of someone beside you, dreaming free of weapons. The wind softens, carrying the rustle of leaves. You picture Philadelphia's tranquil Delaware River, waves lapping the shore at dawn, not strong enough to topple walls, but enough to soothe a lonely heart. Lying in your small room, hearing rain tap the roof, fear fades. The rain only wants to rinse your eyes, unveiling a brighter tomorrow. Having reached the end of tales about mills, cannons, trebuchets, and siege terrors, you realize the greatest treasure isn't a bullet through a wall, but the moment you let your spirit ease, smiling at yourself. The wall to conquer isn't stone, but the invisible barriers in your mind. Doubts, calculations, hesitations. Sleep is the only way to rise above them all. So purse your lips once more, let your eyelids fall, and pause the world outside. Tonight, no bombs, no newsroom clamor. Only the perfect silence after you close your eyes. Your breath, the last bubbles of a steadfast day, and a distant cricket's hum. In dreams, city walls vanish, replaced by rainbows threading clouds, guiding you to a land free of gunpowder, where every dream roams like prairie winds by Lake Tahoe. And if the wall clock's chime wakes you too soon, smile gently. You've walked with us through countless tales, tried on a gunner's boots, and found a haven for sleep. No one can steal that freedom, for in sleep you're the sole monarch, needing no sword or cannon, just a weightless heart and sealed eyelids. As night soaks the corners of New York streets, when the last street lamp yields to darkness, you can still imagine the wind whistling through the creaky wooden door of a riverside home by the Hudson. There, a boy or an old man strains to hear a phone's ring, not tied to cannons or warships, but the faint buzz of a stray mosquito. Everyday life and fragments of memory, shattered stones, Greek fire's glow, wooden arms swinging to tear the sky, dissolve into the void before you can grasp them. On the path to sleep, images of crowned and sword-wielding historical figures blur. They're like actors in a final act of an ancient play. Proud yet solitary Olympias, Mycenaean generals tunneling in shadow, Alexander firing arrows across rivers, and Knossos blazing in Crete's sunlight. But the stars above dim, giving way to a deep black chasm, revealing that it's all illusion, leaving only your breath and the thud of imagination closing shut. Picture a family living peacefully atop a Malibu hill in California. They don't fret over building defensive walls or wielding catapults. They simply lock the door, crank the AC, and sink into restful sleep. Yes, ancient walls could withstand cannons, but today's bedroom walls need only block a chilly draft to cradle warmth. Yet, in antiquity, engineers drafted plans for thousands of warriors to storm fortresses, now reduced to a few smartphone taps to douse the lights. In a cozy New Orleans bar, folks might recount the Minoan double axes, intricately carved in frescoes, then burst into laughter. Sounds like prehistoric hijinks. But moments later, as the bartender pours another bourbon, the mood lightens. Every siege, every grim battering ram recedes into history. Only the soft clink of glasses lingers, reminding you life isn't just about breaking and building. In our modern world, we're besieged by work emails, flooding news feeds, or the pressure to curate an Instagram persona. It's no different from soldiers guarding ramparts, except they wield laptops, and a single click opens countless tunnels to information. So, it's no surprise some draw the curtains at dusk, pop in earbuds, and bury themselves in a world without emails. Their final wall, shielding tranquil sleep. If you're coaxing sleep, glance at the starry sky. Those stars are like security bolts, keeping darkness from creeping too deep into the house below. Pirates once believed the North Star guided them, but now it's a tiny glint, hinting that the world remains boundless, and every dream is a small sail drifting toward the unknown. In a Chicago apartment, a late-night bus horn might be the only cannon jolting you from dreams. Not mills or artillery, just a distant wail. Sometimes that horn is a gentle nudge. Wake, for tomorrow brims with breath awaiting you. So, when you dream of Alexander crossing deserts, eyes fixed on a fiery sunset, remember he too paused, realizing the greatest triumph wasn't his bow, but the next dawn on a child's face. You're the same. The final wall is the safe space in your heart, shielding you from chaos's clamor. To escape the maze, slow down, breathe deeply, and see. The world is vast, but the only limit is your mind. If you cling to dreams of city walls, let them live in sleep. For when you wake, you'll open your eyes, smile, and know your home has outlasted every siege ever chronicled. Don't let today's relentless fortress worries pry you from sleep. Let your soul glide into thin clouds, where only steady breaths and spreading warmth remain. You'll find, despite the world's sieges, you rule a tiny kingdom by your bedside lamp, where closing your eyes silences dream wars, making way for gentle reveries, soft as a moth alighting on curtains. In your slumber, you might dream of ancient Pela's map, where Olympias raised her throne by Lake Jacques, like Lake Michigan, moonlight tracing her face as she whispered prophecies. But come morning, you'll see. Those whispers, not swords, guided you into dreams. And so, tonight, every fortress sleeps. Only your heart's soft beat and soothing breath remain. Let time pause. Let mills, trebuchets, and Knossos' broken tiles fade, yielding to the moment you simply sleep, not to flee, but to be reborn in the truest act of living. Last night, as you drifted between dreams of mossy Knossos and ancient wooden mills, we now reach the final chapter, where every tale closes like a city gate sealed at midnight. But instead of catapults' clamor or cannon whispers, what remains is a tranquil hush, like the quiet pauses in a soulful jazz melody. Picture a deserted Pittsburgh street, where golden streetlights flicker in the dark. Once, rumors of catapult codes might have sparked panic, prompting iron fences. Now, the neighborhood holds only the silhouette of a lone security guard, perched on a wooden chair, occasionally blowing warmth into thin palms to fend off the night's chill. In that scene, you realize the stalwart city wall is now just faded concrete, powerless against creeping cold, yet sturdy enough to hold back emptiness. The old landline on the living room wall hums, bzz, disconnected, like a vague worry, eerily akin to the grim thud of battering rams on ancient stone. But just as you stir to answer, it falls silent, leaving a stillness that beckons sleep. You understand then. Sometimes the wisest choice is to ignore the phone, for any ring at 2 a.m. could be a phantom siege summons. In that moment, Olympias comes to mind, the queen who cowed courts with mystic whispers, like today's spam calls tapping smartphones. She wielded power not with swords, but with belief, making foes tremble. Yet, in the end, a gentle glass of wine or a kind word could sway an empire. Likewise, now, a few friendly chat lines can soothe a colleague's ire. Don't stress. If the system glitches tomorrow, I'll fix it. That brief trust, softer than prophecy, works just as well. In a cozy Denver cafe, young friends huddle, debating video games where cannons blast, towers rise, and sieges unfold in pixels. They roar with laughter, imagining a giant trebuchet crashing a game server, lagging the network to oblivion. A decade later, few recall the game. What lingers is the memory of a night munching pizza, voice chatting, and laughing until tears flowed. That fleeting hearth of joy fades like Knossos' ruins under a wavering sunset. In a modest home near Miami, an old man grips a black cane by a small fire, sipping rum, eyes lost in the hearth's embers. He once spun tales for his grandkids, of mighty catapults, Spartan sappers, the siege of Babylon. But now, only the fire's warm glow remains. As wind rattles the iron gate, he smiles. Just the breeze, kid. The 4G's still strong. No one's breaching this wall. His simple words spark giggles, for the bandwidth battles online echo ancient sieges, both about claiming space. Speaking of space, consider cramped Houston apartments, where owners wrestle to fit a 3-ton antique piano. They muse. Place it there, and the bedroom becomes an impregnable fortress. Who'd dare cross that hulking mass without banging their head? But one lazy night, they'll sleep on the hardwood, face buried in pillows, forgetting furniture strategies. sleep alone calls their name. Today's world, buzzing with pinging emails awaiting replies, can't rival the silence when you close your eyes. That's when you shed every ancient tactic. No fear of rams or crossbows if your heart's at peace. In sleep, you're the sole emperor, free to hit mute notifications, silence spam catapults, and let your soul ride the night breeze, gently brushing your skin. Come morning, waking amid soft blankets in Seattle, you might hear rain pattering on the balcony. Let that rain stand for the final cannon, not shattering walls, just soothing the heart. Start the day by opening the door, breathing damp air, and savoring warm coffee. With each sip, you'll recall, ancient walls may fall, but you're safe under your roof, roused by rain, not a barrage of shells. As the day hums with virtual siege towers, emails, deadlines, tense news, face them with a wry grin. Like toy trebuchets, they're just props. Laugh, knowing you can pull a cozy blanket over your eyes, tuning out last night's trenches. No matter how loud the world roars, sleep remains an unconquerable fortress, shielding you from chaos's din. Now, lower your eyelids once more. Let the heavy cannons in your heart cease their roar. Let ancient gates, once sealed tight, reveal a tiny crack, a sliver leading to a dreamland where wind through curtains sings an endless lullaby. In that realm, no rams pound, no cannons fire, only steady breaths and floating clouds weave you into the gentlest dreams. And if a voice calls, "Hey, wake up," smile sleepily. You've journeyed through walls, from Pella, Crete, Sparta, to Knossos, and modern apartments in New York or San Diego. The tales of sieges are done. All that remains is sleep, tender enough to cradle you in sweet melodies only you can hear. The night has deepened, and as you nestle in blankets, blending with the gentle rhythm of a quiet room, it's time for the final chapter of our tales. Like a flickering candle casting light on the last dialogue between a chaotic past and a peaceful present. Imagine a small room in Austin, Texas. The windows slightly ajar, crickets humming outside, stirring a dreamy haze within you. Once, such breezes might have carried the echo of catapults by the river, sending villagers into panic. Now, only crickets sing, a fragment of sound whispering. The world keeps turning, but you're in a moment of calm. You draw a slow breath, feeling warmth fill your chest, and gently release your mind to the long journey we've shared, from Olympias's commanding prophecies to Knossos's grandeur fading into dust. Picture a Silicon Valley office building where no cannons thunder, only the soft click of mice and glowing blue screens. Today's siege engineers hunch over keyboards, erecting virtual firewalls to guard data, leaving prying eyes stalled by endless passwords. The modern fortress, a string of gibberish safeguarding entire lives. There, you notice a subtle shift. Long ago, a single Greek fire volley could set a city ablaze. Now, the BZZT of a spam email tempts you to jolt awake, scrambling to mute your inbox. A transformed world, yet the dread of being besieged lingers. You learn to let it go, choosing silence over confrontation, like a warm blanket shielding you from the wind's howl outside. Just the other night in Chicago, A barista cleared dishes after a late cafe shift. Across from him stood an old wall, witness to countless sieges, now adorned with vibrant graffiti reflecting streetlight. He grinned, flicked on the radio, and jazz floated through, turning medieval cannons into odd memories. Green trees outside, a coffee-scented breeze, erasing the world's chaos. Then there's a young couple in Brooklyn, renting a third-floor apartment in an old row house, unwittingly defending against city noise. Each night, they block windows with heavy curtains, drape an old sheet to muffle sound, like Pella's folk once piled earth to repel Greek fire. They pour wine, share weary smiles, and collapse into pillows. For a single ambulance siren could shatter their hearts, like a catapult stone hurtling past a rampart. You, in an Atlanta bedroom, doze when a muster call chimes, but it's just your alarm clock. As it buzzes, you clench your eyes, murmuring, "Just a bit longer," dreaming of that silent cannon finally capping its barrel, bathing walls in peace. The room's so still you hear your heartbeat, steady and soft, soothing every lingering fear. In a Salt Lake City suburb, the Smiths huddle under blankets, ready for sleep. Mrs. Smith glances at a faded black and white photo on the wall, once depicting a wooden mill looming by an ancient fortress. Now, the image is pale, but she stays quiet, thinking. Those mills swung, toppling walls, only so we could close our eyes in peace. No need for them now. In that moment, the only sound lulling her is the clock's steady tick, a fortress within, counting down to restful slumber. Imagine a crowded Philadelphia apartment where a child shuts their eyes, blocking out distant car horns. Parents kiss their forehead, whispering, "Time to defend." The child knows nothing of cannons or soldiers, only a cozy bed, warm blankets, and gentle breaths, magical talismans against the fears outside. Dive into this dream, letting past fragments drift away, no longer haunting. The image of Admiral Philip II's assassination at a coronation lingers as a tale. The sword's thrust to a throat fades. Olympias's whispers in dark corners, Greek fires blaze, exist only where stories are told. Knossos' grandeur, with its carved labyrinth, is now just a moss-draped wall. All blur into hazy memory, leaving you on a warm bed, not scorching sands or a watchtower's peak. To escape it all, seek the warmth beneath your blanket. Sleep is the final fortress, banishing every siege specter. Let your soul return to peace, where only breath and heartbeat sing, proof that, though the world roars, in dreams, you're a throneless king or queen, safe in an invisible haven. And if, by night, you dream of walls still standing, thrones unbroken, don't fear. See it as the night's final game, a chance to realize you're strong enough to laugh at danger. With war's roar long faded, you lie beneath blankets, smiling, whispering, "The world's noisy, but sleep is the mightiest key, untouched by any foe." As night deepens, tales of siege tactics, from wooden mills to modern artillery, fade into distant echoes. Yet their legacy endures, like a sheer curtain draped across history, reminding us of strength and fragility woven in a single breath. Picture a quiet Nashville street corner, void of siege towers, lined with warm wooden homes under golden lamplight. Once, ancient townsfolk frantically hauled stones, piling timber, dreading enemies breaching gates at midnight. Now you hear only dry leaves rustling in the yard, a cat's soft meow calling for shelter. The defense today is simply locking the door, drawing curtains, and slipping into dreams. In this stillness, the legacy of heroes and the fallen is etched forever. Through siege eras, women like Olympias ignited empire's tremors, yet as darkness fell, she lingered in the hearts of Pella's children, who whispered of Olympias's specter, a figure terrifying foes even after her death. These legends, though mythic, gifted later generations faith in resilience, and sometimes awe at power's vast reach. But as the city night quiets, you see, that power lives only in tales. Olympias, like us, was mortal, frail before time's march. In another city, Seattle or Chicago, youths read of Knossos, a dazzling palace like a Bronze Age Manhattan where queens and priestesses danced at dusk, praying for harvests. They learn of Thera's eruption, a storm-like catastrophe, and Knossos's fade into shadow. Yet, look closely at its surviving walls, bullhorn motifs, dancers gliding on brick, still glow faintly at dawn. These are traces of a civilization that trusted beauty and ritual over violence, though they too built labyrinths to trap gods and monsters within. What, then, is the legacy? Not mere limestone relics or crumbling forts, but an unwavering belief in art, creativity, and culture's worth. Though empires fall, their works and ideas persist, threading through human memory, inspiring today's scholar transcribing history or artist painting Thera's crimson clouds. Turn back to Alexander the Great, the youth who crossed the Ganges, eyes alight with adventure, yet became legend even in death. His towering image, passed through generations, spurred later kings. If Alexander conquered half the world, who dares say they can't conquer themselves? Lying in bed, hearing cars hum outside, recall that Alexander succumbed to typhoid's fever, passing in Babylon, where he seemed eternally invincible. His immortality lies in stories, while his body turned to dust. Now, in sleep, envision Babylon's cold, desolate nights, lonely, bleak. But at dawn, a warm breeze stirred life onward. Alexander, though grand, let go, and those who recount his name keep his spirit alive, a testament to human will's endurance. When you wake tomorrow, half dreaming, ask, what in you will endure, so one day others speak your name with warmth, as they do Alexander's? This journey's end can't skip Knossos, imperfect, lacking ironclad codes, yet brimming with human nature harmony. Today, debates rage over the Minotaur's reality, but none dispute the bull dancer's fresco. Its faded image on stained stone still stirs awe for courage and zest for life. In sleep, let that image seep in, like night's final gleam, kindling your soul. Though frail, we craft greatness. If ancient walls stood centuries, unyielding to storms or wars, why not forge a heart's rampart, impervious to doubt or fear? In Salt Lake City, Mr. Smith preserved Pella's letters, now translated, teaching descendants, Amid mud and Greek fires blaze, hope persists in ruin. Like you, finding sleep amid chaos, find peace by letting burdens slip, if only for a fleeting moment. Another legacy lies in communities building peace. In cities like Toronto or Mumbai, volunteers aid the homeless, not with cannons or decrees, but with blankets, hot tea, and words. Tomorrow's brighter. This echoes history's harshness. Once, a knot tied a blade, seeking a brutal echo, only to learn a kind morning greeting fosters lasting light. If you dream of an abandoned child, unsure of tomorrow's hope, know there are groups, hands ready to guide them through the dark, offering a restful night. This is the resilient communal spirit, flowing like a river across countless shores, bringing water to the thirsty, warmth to the alone. Our legacy isn't just moss on walls or frescoed crypts. It's etched in hearts, strength in adversity, love in shared pain, hope at dawn's rise. As you shut your eyes one last time, let the tale close with morning mist curling over fields, a blanket stirring faintly with inner warmth, whispering that, despite history's cruelty, we can face dusk smiling and greet dawn renewed. Tonight, having heard every cannon's roar and seen every wall crumble, ease your soul, letting hope thread through your dreams. The ultimate legacy is how we face darkness. With faith, resilience, and the deepest sleep, so tomorrow you wake, seeing dawn's blush on your door, knowing the story lives on, in every breath, in every step ringing on warm earth.